Today's presenters are Bob Cunningham, Expert Advisor at Understood.org, and Meg O'Connell, Vice President of the Workplace Initiatives at Poses Family Foundation. Bob, I'll turn it to you first for a brief introduction.
Thanks, Sarah. So, yeah, my name is Bob Cunningham, and I work with the Understood.org team and with Meg at the Poses Family Foundation. So my background is primarily in K through 12 education, also in post-secondary education in a university setting as well as a technical school setting. So I've worked with a lot of students who transition into those kinds of post-secondary settings and also directly from those and from high school into the workforce. So I'm excited to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Great. Thanks so much, Bob. And Meg, if you could give a brief introduction, that would be great.
Yeah, as Bob said, he and I work together at the Poses Family Foundation, and I am the Vice President of Workplace Initiatives, which is our key workplace program where we work with nonprofit partners and companies to help them launch and or expand their disability inclusion programs. So we are a grant-making entity, but we also offer pro bono and advising and support to our nonprofit partners. So just excited to be here and share with you some of our best practices and lessons learned.
Wonderful. And as everyone can hear, we have some great presenters today, a lot of expertise to take advantage of. So again, any questions that you have, please feel free to ask those through the chat box at any time or provide any comments back. Bob, I'll turn it to you to really kick off our presentation and take us through the first part.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. So things that we're going to cover today, we're going to talk a little bit about what learning and attention issues are, what they're not, and some common myths around them. Then we're going to talk specifically about learning and attention issues in the workplace, best practices and examples from some of our work and from the field. And then we will have a time at the end for Q&A. So we're going to start looking at actually what learning and attention issues are. So if you want to go to that first slide, there we go. So 1 in 5 individuals in the United States has a learning or attention issue. And these are things like attention issues or issues with reading or writing or math or problems with organization and focus. These are brain-based issues. So these are things that are neurologically implicated. They are not visible, which makes it more challenging in a work environment or through a hiring process for people with learning and attention issues because it is not obvious that somebody struggles with a learning or attention issue. These are some of the conditions that we are referring to when we talk about learning and attention issues. We use the term learning and attention issues because it's a broader way to conceptualize the difficulties that people have. It's also more inclusive, so it doesn't require that somebody has been identified through any kind of formal evaluation or process or by a doctor or anything like that. It's really people who are struggling with the symptoms of these kinds of issues. One of the issues that you've heard a lot about, I'm sure, is ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, also dyslexia, which is trouble with reading. Dyslexia is the most prevalent of the learning and attention issues we will discuss. So there's a very strong likelihood that all of you in your workplaces encounter people with both ADHD and dyslexia, and those two conditions often co-occur in the same person. So somebody if they have ADHD, they are more likely to also have dyslexia. If they have dyslexia, they are more likely to also have ADHD. Executive functioning issues is the hot topic right now in the education space anyway. These are things like planning and summarizing and organizing, and really the CEO of the brain. Also things like flexible thinking. So can you look at a situation and come up with multiple possible ways to solve the problem? That's flexible thinking. That's an executive function. Dyscalculia is difficulty with math, dysgraphia with writing, dyspraxia with motor coordination. Again, none of these things are visible, so It's really the interaction with the person that will let you know if this is an issue for them, or somebody may choose to self-disclose to you that they have these conditions. Nonverbal learning disabilities, auditory processing disorder, sensory processing issues, and visual processing issues occur less frequently in the population, but can have a major impact in the workplace, something like a nonverbal learning disability that can affect social skill development and the understanding of nonverbal social cues. In other words, they have difficulty reading facial expressions or reading body language, that sort of stuff. Auditory processing and visual processing is how a brain makes sense out of stimuli that they're getting from their senses, either from their eyes or from their ears. And sensory processing is how they make sense of a bunch of different senses combined. So it's not trouble with actual hearing or with actual vision. It's how their brain makes sense of what they are seeing and hearing that becomes problematic. Here are some things that learning and attention issues do not include. Intellectual disabilities, developmental disorders like Down syndrome, autism spectrum disorders, sensory impairments, like I said, blindness or hearing impairments, physical or motor impairments, social, emotional, or behavioral disorders, and emotional disturbances, including kind of the effects of trauma. So when we talk about learning and attention issues, we are not talking specifically about those things. And the reason is that if somebody has one of those conditions, it's better to start with resources and organizations that really focus on them because they are much more complex, more comprehensive in the way they impact a person's development. So we would encourage you to start with organizations that really focus on those issues, but understand that people with those kinds of conditions can also have learning and attention issues. It's just usually better to start getting information and thinking about how you help someone with organizations that focus on those particular issues. There are a lot of myths surrounding people with learning and attention issues, so I'm going to go over some facts about learning and attention issues, and then we'll also show you some of the corresponding myths. The first fact, 1 in 5 individuals has a learning and attention issues, so those are more prevalent than a lot of people think. So if you think of your workplace, if you have 5 people sitting in a room, one of them is likely to have some kind of learning and attention issue. So these really are things that all of us who are in employment situations, who are responsible for supervising employees, who are responsible for hiring employees, this is something that we should all be familiar with because we are going to encounter people with these conditions. The myth that's associated with that one is that learning and attention issues are rare. They're not common. They are, in fact, pretty common. 20% of the population is a lot of people. There is no scientific evidence that links diet to learning and attention issues. If you read the popular press and media, oftentimes you will see articles around diet and how they impact people's attention and behavior and things like that. That's not what we're talking about here. Diet has no relation to learning and attention issues. These are brain-based, neurologically based conditions. Eating poorly does not, in fact, cause learning and attention issues. Vaccinations also do not cause learning and attention issues. That is a hot topic in the press every so often. There is absolutely no scientific evidence that links vaccinations to learning and attention issues. Individuals with learning and attention issues are just as smart as everyone else. This is a fact. There is no correlation between a person's intelligence and whether or not they have a learning or attention issue. So somebody who has dyslexia has difficulty with the mechanics of reading. Somebody with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder has difficulty paying attention to things that other people want them to pay attention to and inhibiting their impulses, but neither of those things have anything to do with how smart someone is. Learning and attention issues are linked to IQ is a very popular myth. It's just that, it's a myth. Again, no relationship to intelligence. Next. A fact that you should all know is that there are no cures for learning and attention issues. People do not outgrow them, which means if a person is in elementary school and they have a learning or attention issue in elementary school, they will still have that learning or attention issue as an adult. It will just impact them differently because the way these conditions impact people depends a lot on what setting the person is in. So the way it impacts them in school may be different than the way it impacts them when they are adults in the workplace. But the issue is still there for them. They still struggle with it. So while there is no cure for learning and attention issues, there are ways to help somebody with learning and attention issues. And as employers or as people who work with folks who have learning and attention issues, we are all invested in their success. If you have an employee or someone you're looking at hiring, you have them in your company because you believe that they have something to offer your company. So it is in your interest and the company's interest to learn about the learning and attention issues and how you can support them in the workplace so that they are successful, because if they are successful, your business is successful. Another fact, some learning and attention issues do make it hard to interpret visual information. But there's a myth that glasses can correct learning and attention issues. That's not true. Hearing aids, glasses, those kinds of devices cannot correct for a learning and attention issue. Like diet and vaccination, there is also no indication that learning and attention issues are related to how much TV you watch, how many video games you play, that sort of stuff. There's a lot of research out there on people with learning and attention issues and how much time they spend with television, video games, things like that, but there is no causal relationship there. And the next one, go ahead and show the myth. People with learning and attention issues are just being lazy is the myth that I hear most frequently repeated in schools and in workplace settings, is that someone with a learning or attention issue is not working hard enough, or they're just being lazy. Somebody may in fact be lazy. Someone may in fact not be working hard enough. But that is not because they have a learning or attention issue. People with learning and attention issues tend to be just as industrious, just as committed, just as intent on doing well and performing well as anyone else. They just need often to figure out ways to have their learning or attention issue impact them less in the workplace. And for that, they often need help from you or from someone else in their workplace. This is a fact. With the right support and intervention, individuals with these issues can thrive in school and at work. Many people with learning and attention issues have very successful careers. Many people with learning and attention issues thrive in all kinds of workplaces. So there is nothing about learning and attention issues that makes them unable to be successful in a workplace. Like I said, sometimes they may need to have things presented to them differently. Sometimes they may need to have things presented to them more than once. But once they get it conceptually, they are just as able to do what you need them to do as anyone else is.
Hey, Bob, a quick question for you before we jump into the next section. So a lot of really great information and a really good overview for some examples of learning and attention issues and difference between those and disabilities as well, or some examples of disabilities. If you're somebody who maybe you're sitting on the line even for this webinar right now and you're taking a look at some of these facts and myths and some of these examples that you shared, and you feel like maybe you could be somebody who has dyslexia or slight dyslexia, because again, I know that there is a spectrum for all of these things as well, ADHD included. It's not just always the most extreme version of probably what we default to thinking to. Is there an example that you can think of where maybe somebody didn't realize that they had a learning or attention issue in a way that they were able to test for that in a way, or a journey that they were able to take themselves on to discover more?
Absolutely. So you're right, Sarah. These are continuum kind of issues, right? So there are milder forms and more severe forms. In my experience, especially people who are particularly bright, so very intelligent folks, and folks who have gotten good support are often able to really compensate for having a dyslexia or an ADHD. And they probably realize themselves, so there might be people on the phone who realize that learning to read was more challenging for you than it was for some of your peers, and you really could never figure that out because by all indications you were every bit as smart as that peer. And so why was it harder for you? And this is part of the frustration of having a learning disability like dyslexia or an attention deficit. I'm really good at a lot of these things. Why is this particular thing so challenging for me, so hard for me? And if that's the case for you, then exploring that on a site like understood.org or talking to a medical professional or a psychologist or someone like that is a great way to get good information. It is really, really common for people with learning and attention issues to actually be diagnosed as adults. And that's usually because they have found ways to compensate for themselves, or they're just really bright people who were able to be successful despite the fact that they have a learning or attention issue. So if you're someone who has looked around and said, I'm as capable as they are, why is this particular thing, why is math, or why is reading, or why is sitting still, or why is paying attention for long periods of time, why does it seem to be so much more difficult for me than for everyone else? Then you're someone who should really be asking those questions of professionals in your networks.
And I think those are some really great tips and resources, suggestions for where people can turn to if they want to find out more. I think that's probably one of the biggest questions that we may receive when it comes to learning and attention issues is we expand people's minds and their knowledge of what could be considered as a learning or attention issue, but then it's the question of, okay, now that I have this understanding, maybe this is something that applies to me because I have struggled in certain areas, or sometimes when I read something, or more commonly than not when I read something, sometimes the words get mixed up, or sometimes the letters within a word, I might have a little mix up there as well. And I know, again, just one piece of information that I always like to share, just an example of that spectrum that we were talking about, is there are a couple people who I have come across in my life who have disclosed being dyslexic, and it's a range. One person has said to me that it's more of a mild form, if that's the appropriate term to use, to where they really just have to double check what they're writing down or when they're typing things in because they might mix up a couple different words or the order that they go in. And another person who disclosed to me mentioned that it might be a little bit more auditory for them. Even when they are listening to somebody talk, the words get mixed up. So it's really just listening to keywords and picking out key phrases when somebody's speaking to them. And they have a little bit of a harder time with longer phrases and longer phrased questions. So something to keep in mind even when you're conducting interviews or a phone screen, or when you're typing out questions as a recruiter or hiring manager. That's something that might not just benefit somebody potentially with dyslexia or a learning or attention issue, but somebody without that even. Just keeping questions short and sweet and straight to the point leaves less room for error as well.
You're right, and if you look up something like auditory processing issues, right, what you just described is actually something that co-occurs frequently with dyslexia rather than dyslexia itself, and that's an auditory processing issue. So if you're having trouble with that whole kind of length of a string of words or sentences or listening for longer periods of time to someone talking, that sort of stuff, that's a fairly common condition, and there are a lot of good ways to intervene if someone's having that. And I think your suggestions around what an interviewer can do and just to be aware of it. The other thing that I'll say is that all of these symptoms of these learning and attention issues exist in everyone, right? So we all have varying capacity for the amount of information we can take in at once, or the length of sentences, or the length of speaking that we can internalize at a time, or the amount that we can read perfectly accurately, or the number of words and syllables and stuff that we can spell perfectly accurately, right? So everyone has a point at which that capacity breaks down for them. The difference for people with learning and attention issues is that it breaks down sooner, and it actually gets in the way of your day-to-day functioning in school or at work or socially. So if you feel or if you think that you are interacting with somebody where these kinds of things obviously kind of get in their way, then that's when you really start to look at how to accommodate for that, or how to make some changes in what you are doing, because it's not necessarily something that that person can change in the moment. They're going to rely on the person who is interviewing them, or the person who is talking to them, or the person who is working with them to make some adjustments in the way that person is doing things so that they can be more successful. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I think that's some really great information, so thank you so much for expanding upon that. All right, and I know we have a couple other questions, but just for the sake of time, we'll keep moving on into that next section, and I'll be sure to call out any other questions that we receive along the way.
So Meg, I think this is your part.
Yeah, I'm ready. I was waiting for an introduction, so thank you, Bob. Yeah, so we are going to switch gears now and talk about what's important to you guys in the workplace. So Bob did a great job talking about what learning and attention issues are, and this comes up a lot for us, but what are some of the practical things that you can do when you think either your colleague or yourself might have a learning disability or learning and attention issue? And we wanted to start with some things, you know, at the front end. Our first engagement a lot of times with a new employee, and if there are recruiters on the phone, this is your day job in and out, is to interview folks and understand how they're going to fit into the organization. So one of the first things we advise people to do is to really understand their interviewing style, know what you like to do and how you like to engage, but then also be sure that you're able to pull out other tools in your toolbox if you see that maybe your style or the approach of your interviewing process is not resonating with the individual. Sometimes you can struggle having a phone interview with somebody. We've all been on those calls, right, where people are multitasking and, you know, you've asked a question and they're not responding. This can be a struggle for folks with learning and attention issues. You know, Skype interviews or Zoom interviews can be really effective in this way. Sending questions in advance can be effective. Really engaging in different ways. You know, the environment is also really important. So when we talk about your work environment and where you have the interviews, many offices are into the open format and open cubicles where there's lots of noise. Some recruiters or managers like to go to the cafeteria so people can kind of see the mulling of the employees and what the culture's like. Well, that can be really distracting. And certainly not that you shouldn't do any of those things, but if you see that your candidate or even your coworker, it doesn't have to be an interview setting, is struggling to pay attention and you see them wandering off and not connecting on, you know, the conversation that you're having, again, it's important to be aware of your surroundings and be able to say, hey, I think things are missing, you know, let's move to another location. Hey, why don't we move somewhere else? It's a little loud in here. And you certainly don't want to make them feel awkward or embarrassed. Make it your personal choice, because not everyone's going to be comfortable to disclose or ID as a person with a learning and attention issue. And as Bob indicated, many folks may think they have one, but they're not really sure, so they don't want to give voice to it if they're not 100% sure. So just being open to different environments and different channels. You know, and when we talk about channels and framework, people with learning and attention issues are often supported by other organizations like Understood, and there are nonprofit partners, and the school systems work with kids with learning and attention issues. Many of you likely know the colleges and university systems have an office for disabled student service office that supports kids in college with learning and attention issues. So seek out these organizations to say, hey, we're looking to find great candidates, and we want to access the talent pool here, because as we heard from Bob, learning and attention issues are not a predicator to success or being successful in the workplace. So you want to make sure that you're, opening up the aperture for the greatest results to have diversity within your talent pool, and that, of course, includes people with learning and attention issues. As we talk about the interview, and those of you that are recruiters or in HR on the call know this, we talk a lot about the essential functions of the job when we talk about the Americans with Disability Act. And, sometimes during an interview, we're so focused on behavioral interviewing, or tell us about this scenario where you had a difficult coworker, or tell me about your most challenging project and how you strategize through that. And all that's great, but you may not be getting actually at the job tasks and what it is that the person's going to be doing day to day. So try to get as specific as possible. Maybe give them a problem to solve. Maybe show them some work products that have been produced where there might be something that could have been done differently, and ask them how they would have changed it, or what they would have done, or what they would add to it. I know at the Poses Family Foundation, we do interviews. We give our most challenging problem in advance to one of our candidates and say, tell us how you would solve this problem. What is it that you would do, and what would be your approach? And it helps us understand how their mind works, how they think about a problem, how they process the information they've received, and how they get to the outcome. So it lets them really demonstrate who they are and how they think about what we have presented to them, and how they can come up with some great ideas. And it's wonderful to see when you have a variety of candidates, because you can see the different processes that people go through and the outcomes that people get to, and it's really fascinating. Allow space for disclosure. This is the last one on this page, and I think this is the hardest one for us as HR professionals or recruiters, because, we're trying to put our best foot forward, so's the candidate, and sometimes it's good to just pause and say, hey, during this process, is there anything that I can get you that would help make you more comfortable? Maybe somebody needs a break just to take a deep breath and process what they have already heard. Maybe it's naturally building those things into your interview style, where you give somebody, if you've got meeting after meeting after meeting, let somebody go sit and grab a cup of coffee by themselves and process information. You may get folks that say, you know what, I need that space. I would love it. I know I have 4 interviews today. I would love it if I could just grab 5 minutes after each one where I could sit and summarize what I heard in that meeting that will help me prep for the next one. And so, give that space for the candidate to talk about what works for them. We really want to empower our candidates to be the best they can be, and advocating early on is really a great way to get them started. And we can go to the next slide. So there are some other things, and a lot of these will seem very basic, and we've seen all of these in the workplace, but these are, ways that we can support employees and our colleagues, visitors, vendors, whoever comes into our work environment who may have learning and attention issues. The first and most important is setting clear expectations. So whether it's a meeting, whether it's an event, whether it's an interview, just setting out objectives up front, going through those objectives, recapping them, the things that we all do in a great PowerPoint presentation like we're doing today, and just really set those up for folks. Ask questions for understanding, again, very basic, but make sure we all process information differently. You know, I heard this story not too long ago when we were talking about folks with learning and attention issues, and it was a classroom situation, and the kids were instructed to draw a star. And so there are all these beautiful 5-point stars, and some were, you know, shooting stars, and some were colors, and this one kid drew a picture of Lady Gaga. So everybody processes information differently, and for them, that's what they saw as a star. So be clear with the expectations and the understanding and what it is that you're wanting to get out of your meeting, event, or interview. Written instructions are always helpful. I do this all the time. I am not great with hallway conversations. We've all had, you know, the water cooler conversations where 2 or 3 great things come out of them, and you walk away and you're like, I can't remember what that third one was. So someone should be responsible. If it's not you, somebody in that hallway meeting needs to follow up and say, great, I'll type this up in an email and send it out to everybody just to make sure everybody has, again, those clear expectations, and you're checking for understanding. And of course, if there's any deadlines or, oh, we have to get that done by next week, it's in writing, and nobody's like, oh my God, I walked away and I forgot, because I think that's probably happened to everybody on this call. Again, this is back to the disclosure piece, but asking if they need any resources to do their jobs. I mean, we've all had scenarios where, you know, we feel like, oh, we have basic tools that we need to do our jobs, but sometimes that can include a quiet space. Sometimes it can include different hours. Years ago, I had a colleague who I worked very closely with, and she was a night owl, and I was a morning and I still am a morning person, and so I get up every day at 5 a.m., and she was one of those that would be cranking stuff out at 12, 1 in the morning, and I had been asleep for 4 hours at that point. So we created this great opportunity to hand things off to one another, so it really worked for our different styles and our strong times during the day. And so things like that you can adapt and adjust so you know the strengths that people have and how they learn, how they process, and how they work can be really helpful in the workplace too. The last one, again, and I think this is good for all of us, no matter what the issue, but you know, letting candidates, colleagues, people that report to you directly know that you're available to address any issues and concerns. You know, Bob indicated earlier that a lot of people get diagnosed when they're adults. So this may be new information for a coworker or a colleague that is trying to process this information and how it's going to impact them in the workplace and what supports they might need. And so as folks come forward, it's about having that meaningful dialogue. And I know the Getting Hired team does a really great job giving you guys tools to have those conversations about disclosure in the workplace and helping employees who need resources. So just being open and available to those conversations is really critical. Sometimes a disclosure or being vulnerable to say, I need a support, can be really difficult for someone. So just being that kind of warm, friendly, open face that says, hey, you know, we're here to support you and help you, and we want to give you the tools to do your job is a great approach and will help not just the individual, but the entire work team. We can go to the next slide. And that last bullet was a perfect segue to our next about offering accommodations for a more inclusive workplace. So there are some great tools and we use a lot of these on my team at the Workplace Initiative. We recommend them a lot with the folks that we work with. And so technology is a great equalizer. We hear it all the time. And so there are many tools that we can use that really help people stay on track and focus. So Grammarly is one that's used a lot. We all are familiar with spell check, which is great, and a lot of us cannot spell anymore because we rely so heavily on it. Grammarly takes it a step further and actually checks your grammar for you and helps with fragmented sentences and comma placements and all of those things to really tighten up someone's writing. So if someone has dyslexia and struggles with that, this can be a great tool for them. If someone struggles with, gosh, I never quite got commas, this is a great thing for them too. So if they're writing reports or documents, it'll really tighten up their writing and help them feel more confident and productive. Rescue Time, another, app, and also Team Metric is another one that's used. So if you've got someone that maybe has executive functioning issues or doesn't understand how much time it takes them to finish a work product or a task, or maybe they need that structure to say, oh, I know I can knock this out in 30 minutes, but I'm having trouble getting started. Just setting that, time clock can get them started. And it also helps them manage their time and understand how much time they're taking on the process. Things, focus boosters, another one, speech notes. We've all heard of voice to text. That's a great option for someone that, again, who maybe is dyslexic and has trouble, writing things down, but can voice it very eloquently. So great apps. You can explore all of these in your app store. Folks in your learning and development team, which we talk about in the last bullet, they likely have access to these and can also tell you what apps are supported by your organization. And they can also let you, your procurement team can also let you know, gosh, we have been having folks download Grammarly in an unprecedented amount. Maybe we should see about, hooking up and getting special rates with them since so many of our employees are using this. So there'll be things that you'll be able to access there, so something to keep an eye on there. Visual supports and processing information in different ways. This is great. We all talk about visual learners and auditory processing and those types of things. And, especially if you're dealing with large teams, it's great to provide information in multiple formats. So you can use charts and schedules and reminders and milestones and owners of this section and that, and can really be helpful for not only when you're having, planning meetings or project check-in meetings, individual updates. It then gives an opportunity for individuals to really gravitate to what works for them. And this is another great opportunity as a team member or a manager or leader to ask your colleagues what works best for them. I'm visual. You can tell me something 5 times and I think I get it, but if I see it, it's very different for me. I experience it different and it clicks in a whole different way for me. And there are a lot of people that works for them. So, ask your colleagues what works for them and, try to accommodate them as best as possible. And again, if you have multiple team members, use as many strategies as possible. Know the internal accommodations. So how does the process work within your organization? If someone, discloses or says, gosh, I could use a tool and how do I get it? It's really important that everyone knows what that process looks like within their organization. Can you find it, from your HR department? Is it on, the internal website? Does it appear in newsletters? Are there easy access points so folks can find it? So knowing how to share that information with your colleagues is going to be really important too. We talked a little bit about the learning and development team. This is another great resource from a standpoint of if you've come across an issue and you're not sure really how to address it, chances are the learning and development team, who does obviously a lot of training and engagement for staff at all levels, all different learning styles, all different learning abilities, might have resources for you as well too in addressing something that you're facing. So they can be a great internal resource in addition to accommodations to reach out and get ideas and get their perspective on how to handle a situation that may be coming up. All right. I think, Bob, this is back to you.
Yep, I'm back. Thank you, Meg. That was excellent and very specific, I think. I think everyone will have loved that. I'm going to talk just a little bit about kind of 5 things that everyone on the phone can do to help empower the 1 in 5 people with learning and attention issues, in addition to the great things and complementary to the great things that Meg mentioned. So the first one is that October is a whole bunch of different days, LD, ADHD, everything else, because everything has a day now, including like, chocolate chip cookies and hamburgers, but so do people with learning and attention issues. Here are the ones that come up in October. So take advantage of that. Watch the media, watch to see what is available out there about learning and attention issues, because a lot more will be coming out in October. Know the facts. This is important for you. As folks who work with people with learning and attention issues, who supervise them, who are in charge of hiring them, know some of the facts. There is a great report from the National Center for Learning Disabilities that gives you an awful lot of facts about learning disabilities in particular. So go ahead and check that out, print it out, share it with people in your businesses and your companies. It's a great thing to know. Next one. Host a company-wide lunch and learn to educate employees on these issues. So, find a space in your calendar, professional development calendar, sort of the company calendar, and get a lunch and learn together where people who are interested or who should be interested in learning and attention issues are invited to come share some of their experiences and learn from somebody, either somebody who has a learning and attention issue, somebody who has particular knowledge about learning and attention issues. There are a lot of universities, clinics associated with hospitals, advocacy organizations that would be happy to provide someone to come and be part of lunch and learn sort of thing with you. If you have employees who have children with learning and attention issues, understood.org is a phenomenal resource for them, so share it with them. Let them know that understood.org is out there, and if they have kids with learning and attention issues, Understood is a site that was designed specifically for parents of kids with learning and attention issues. It's available in English and Spanish. It's entirely free and has a wonderful group of tools and content. The other thing I will say about Understood is that it's something that you can use. Understood covers people from ages 3 to 21. The content is devoted toward people from 3 to 21. But I will tell you that much of what's in there around high school, much of what's in there around post-secondary education is absolutely applicable to the workplace. What we do in schools for high schoolers who have dyslexia are things that you could readily do in a workplace in terms of accommodations and things like that. So go ahead and use Understood to get information for yourself, share Understood with your employees who themselves may have learning and attention issues or who may have kids with learning and attention issues. You can actually use one of the tools called Through Your Child's Eyes. It's available on the homepage at Understood to see what it's like to struggle with a learning and attention issue. Pick reading issues, pick attention issues, pick math issues, whatever you'd like. Pick an older student or pick a little kid, and you'll get to hear from an expert, you'll get to play a simulation, and you'll get to hear from a person who struggles with these learning and attention issues. It's a great way to build empathy. It's also a good way to just kind of sit back and think about what could be done for that person if he or she was coming to you in whatever capacity you have professionally. So it's an awesome tool to use. And the last one is increase awareness of learning and attention issues by sharing personal stories. So Understood has a section where different folks share what it's been like for them to have learning and attention issues, and it's everyone from, just kind of your typical parent out there or your typical student to celebrities and politicians, well-known people. So go and look at what they have to say about having had a learning and attention issue. And again, for your own benefit, think of what you would do with that kind of person. And if you have someone like Damon John who has dyslexia and other learning issues, like that's somebody that we would all be happy to have working with us, working for us in our companies. So imagine the kinds of things that your company could do to either encourage, empower, and support someone like him, or to discourage and disempower and have him just be a transit employee at your place of work. So think of the power that your company has and that you personally have within that company to make your workplace a great place for people with learning and attention issues to thrive. Your turn. Text Sarah with the chat.
Yeah.
Question.
No, thank you both, Meg and Bob, for all of the great content. I think this was extremely helpful to learn more about learning and attention issues and understand just the demographic, the population that is impacted, which could be anybody, and to know that a lot of people are really diagnosed as adults as well. I think that's a common misconception, Bob, as you alluded to and as you went over, that ADHD and dyslexia, just as an example of the many learning attention issues, are only diagnosed when you're a child versus when you're an adult as well. So I wanted to summarize some of the information that you all shared and wanted to ask if there was anything that I was missing, just to really hone in on a couple of the points that you said. And that, again, part of the reason why individuals with learning and attention issues might not disclose that, because that's a question that we often receive, really trying to put ourselves in the shoes of that employee or that job seeker or that student. You know, why aren't they self-disclosing? We're really trying to make ourselves an inclusive environment or an inclusive place for them to feel comfortable doing that, that they may not be aware that they have a learning or attention issue. They might feel as though they might need an assistance in some area, but they aren't sure exactly what to call that or to actually put a diagnosis to that. So offering resources like the ones that you all mentioned for employees could be really helpful for them, and then helpful to have them potentially disclose then that that is in fact something that they need further assistance with or an accommodation with. And then some of the examples that we say with any diagnosis or potentially disability is the fear of being perceived differently or being held back from an opportunity. Those are just some of the common fears that we hear about from job seekers when they talk about disclosing something to a colleague or especially to a manager or to an employer as well. But Bob and Meg wanted to ask, are there any other items or examples that come to mind when thinking about the challenges that a job seeker with a learning or attention issue might encounter in their job search, or when trying to, communicate and sell themselves in a phone interview or in-person interview, that really would be really helpful for the audience to keep in mind?
Sure, I'll start. One that comes to mind that we hear about frequently is the online application process can be cumbersome and sometimes difficult for those with learning and attention issues. And particularly we hear about the timing out issue or the inability to automatically save. We hear from folks with dyslexia that, being able to print out online application questions at home is helpful, and not all systems enable that, to be able to work on their answers at home and then, type them in, or that they work with their voice-to-text software that would enable them to talk their answers into the various line items and applications. So that would be something that I think that obviously the IT department should be made aware of, but sometimes the application processes can be a little bit cumbersome. So being sure that there is a workaround, or, that, we recently worked with an organization that had a hotline number if you need an accommodation, and when you called it, it went nowhere. So making sure that if you have a access line, or if you need some an accommodation or assistance in the application process, that there is somebody there who is ready, willing, and able to help you with anything that may come up through the process.
I can give one too. Well, first, one of the things that I did not mention that I probably should have along the way is that many people with learning and attention issues do a big exhale when they leave school. And that's because learning disabilities and things like that are so closely aligned with academic skills and school and schoolwork and stuff like that. So oftentimes the last thing people want to think about is how that learning issue is going to then impact them in a work setting, because they're just looking at it like, thank God I got through school, now this won't get in my way anymore, and I can go on to have my happy, successful life, because the learning issue was really only for school, right? So sometimes you will get people who are, for lack of a better word, sort of in denial that that learning issue is still going to have an impact on them when they get to the workplace. So creating that sort of safe space for them to talk about that or to think about that is important, and it's just something that you should recognize when you're talking to people, especially if they're just coming out of school. Practically speaking, another thing that I'll say in keeping with what Meg was just saying about an application process, so writing is actually a terrible way to decide how smart someone is or how capable they might be. Because writing, out of all of the academic tasks and things like that, is sort of the most susceptible to most learning and attention issues. So there is often a really, really big difference between the way somebody with a learning and attention issue can present themselves in speaking and in thinking and in conversation than in writing. So if you look at different examples, and there are some on Understood and some other places, of what writing can look like in terms of organization and spelling errors and the way they put thoughts together and stuff like that, you might recognize some of that. And I would just encourage you not to dismiss an otherwise promising candidate because of writing that kind of looks subpar. If you have the opportunity, or if you allow recorded responses, video responses, verbal responses, whatever, to the pieces of an application or an application process, you might get a totally different take on someone than what you would get through their writing. So I'll throw that out as a caution.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about that mindset from when somebody leaves school and then enters the workplace, and kind of having that side that you mentioned. So that's a really great point to keep in mind, and really helpful information. Kind of going along with that, another question that we had received is situationally, and we had a job seeker disclose this to us, currently a student. So this job seeker, and you could apply this to the workplace as well, but this job seeker is a student, and they have an auditory processing disorder and is struggling to gain accommodations at school, and really just trying to educate professors and career service centers to be more understanding about an accommodation that's needed, even something as simple as having a note taker. Do you have any advice as to best ways to educate about the need for an accommodation in a situation like that, and even, again, something that could apply to an employee in the workplace who is in that same scenario?
Meg, do you want to take it, or do you want me?
Yeah, I mean, I can start, and then you can chime in. So a couple of things. I think there's an opportunity for individuals to self-advocate, and I think it's creating that environment that it's okay for people to speak up and say, gosh, you know, as a form of process, it might be great for us all to, you know, have a note taker in these meetings. I'm happy to be the first person, or I'm happy to own it. You know, I shared this example a couple of weeks ago, that there was an employee who had a learning and attention issue, and kind of the game they used to play with themselves was, okay, I'm going to be a court reporter and I'm going to capture every word in this meeting and really be able to think about it and digest it, and allow them to be hyper-focused on the content of that meeting, and then have the documentation to take it back to them, digest it a little bit further, add additional comments, and engage further with their colleagues. But how this came about was this was in a meeting where no cell phones were allowed, no computers were allowed, it was all pen and paper, and it was all kind of whiteboarding and dialogue, and there was no formal note-taking other than everybody was responsible for their own. Well, this individual had a learning and attention issue and really struggled keeping up with the track of the conversations and going from one topic to the next to the next. And so they actually advocated and had heard from other colleagues that it would be really great if there was kind of some formal note-taking process. So she went to her manager and said, you know, I'd really love to be that person because this is the thing that I'm really, really good at, and I take excellent notes. And they were going to rotate it among the team members, and she said, no, I really want to do this. And this really helped her focus, and she was able to tell her manager why she needed this to help her stay engaged. And her engagement went up, the team's engagement went up, everybody had something to refer to afterwards, kind of that setting clear expectations, providing follow-up and dialogue. So I think being able to not only ask for help, but also be aware of where you can see where people might be struggling when you're in meetings and how you can offer them support.
Yeah, I think that's excellent, Meg. And, you know, for the particular student who has the auditory processing issue, at most universities and colleges and things like that, something that I have seen work exceptionally well is to have a solution before you go and talk to someone. So if you kind of know yourself well enough to know what helps you and what gets in your way, just being able to say that very directly to a professor or to a university center or kind of anyone else is usually the best way to get what you need, right? Many times professors won't even get into the whole disability services center or office and say, well, we need this documentation, that documentation. If what you're saying sounds reasonable, they'll just go ahead with it because it's easier than pursuing all the processes and stuff like that. So if you have a clear idea of what helps you, just present that. That's often a good thing to do. Also, for somebody with an auditory processing issue, there is an app. It's a free app, and then there's also an upcharge for the professional version or whatever. But it's called Otter, like the little rodent, Otter. And Otter is a great voice-to-text kind of note-taking thing. So you can use something like Otter to keep yourself on track a lot of times with notes and things like that.
That's really helpful. Thank you both for that information. I'll be sure to pass that on, though. I believe the person who asked that question is still on the webinar as well. But that also brings us right to time. Again, if we did not get to your question, I will be happy to follow up with you directly. And if need be, definitely ask Meg and Bob for their advice on a response as well. So I wanted to thank you all again, Bob and Meg and Rashonda, for all of this great information, for taking the time to present this to our audience today, and for your expertise. And thank everybody who joined today for participating as well. And we will follow up with the link to the recording as soon as it's ready.
Hey, thanks, Sarah.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.
You too. Take care.